Since Inauguration Day, the Trump administration has been deliberating over what to do about the war in Afghanistan. Tonight, the president will address the nation and reveal changes to that policy. The U.S. has almost 10,500 troops there now. More than 2,400 Americans have died, and more than 17,600 have been wounded since the U.S. invaded Afghanistan after 9/11. And tens of thousands of Afghan civilians and military personnel have been killed. For many Afghans, President Trump's announcement can't come soon enough. Special correspondent Nick Schifrin starts our coverage.
In Afghanistan this weekend, an anxious country celebrated its Independence Day. Security was extremely tight. The government controls only half the country. Over the last couple years, violence has increased, stability has decreased, and the Afghan government says it still needs the U.S.
Hopefully there is a one day that we will be a good partner without having any troops in Afghanistan. But for the time being, it is necessary.
Mirwais Yassini is the first deputy speaker of Afghanistan's lower parliament. In 2009, he ran for Afghan president. He speaks for many here when he asks President Trump to increase U.S. troops.
We would like to have a steady and continuous war against ISIS, particularly in Taliban. Ambiguity is costing us. And we are paying, the international security is paying the prices for the delay of the strategy which is coming out of the White House.
For months, the Trump administration's been debating its policy. Now fired senior advisor Steve Bannon advocated withdrawal or replacing troops with private contractors. President Trump's expected to reject that plan and endorse a 4,000 to 5,000 troop increase advocated by military advisors with long histories in Afghanistan. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, who is a brigadier general, was tasked to fight Afghan corruption. Chief of Staff John Kelly, a former four-star whose son, First Lieutenant Robert Kelly, died in Afghanistan. And Defense Secretary James Mattis, who led troops on the ground during the Afghan invasion. They've teamed up with current commander General John Nicholson, who just yesterday painted an apocalyptic picture if the U.S. abandoned Afghanistan.
If we were to fail, it would unleash waves of migration in the millions around the world. If we were to fail, it would embolden jihadists globally.
Putting some more firepower back in can make a huge difference at the right time and at the right place to be successful.
From 2011 to 2013, General John Allen was the U.S.'s top commander in Afghanistan. Last year, he campaigned against Donald Trump for Hillary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton will be exactly the kind of commander-in-chief America needs.
But today, he's backing President Trump if he increases troop numbers.
Here's an opportunity for President Trump to make decisions that can put us on the road to the success that he's looking for.
Allen and the president's military advisors say deploying more troops that are better integrated and have no departure date can turn the tide and help push the Taliban to the negotiation table.
You can get a lot more out of 5,000 if they're properly positioned to train and to advise. And if we resource this properly, and we resource it in the context of both time and the right kinds of individuals, we can be successful.
As a civilian, Donald Trump disagreed. Between 2011 and 2013, he wrote at least 11 tweets criticizing the Afghan government and urging President Obama to withdraw. "We should leave Afghanistan immediately," he wrote in March 2013. "No more wasted lives. If we have to go back in, we go in hard and quick. Rebuild the U.S. first." That skepticism is shared by retired Lieutenant Colonel and former National Security Council staffer Doug Ollivant.
What is this magic powder, this secret sauce, this new idea that you're going to do with this new 4,000 troops that you weren't doing when we had almost 100,000 troops in country? And if it didn't work with 100,000 troops, why do you think it's going to work now?
Ollivant used to be a senior advisor in eastern Afghanistan advocating for more troops, but today he and other critics advocate leaving a small number of U.S. assets to ensure Afghan government stability and facilitate counterterrorism, and otherwise to withdraw.
Pulling the Band-Aid off will hurt, but are the policy options going to be any different 10 years from now or 15 years from now? The best tribute we might be able to give to someone who died in Afghanistan is not to have another generation of children die in Afghanistan.
Many Afghans acknowledge while the country has made great strides, major parts of the U.S. policy haven't worked. But they don't want the U.S. to abandon them. And they urge the president not only to increase U.S. troops, but somehow help fix the problems that have long plagued the Afghan government, a lack of resources and endemic corruption.
My advice is to support the people of Afghanistan economically, financially, the corruption. Fighting against the corruption is not less important than fighting against the terrorism.
It's been 16 years since the U.S. invaded Afghanistan. President Trump's hoping his decision can prevent what he's complained about, his successor inheriting America's longest war. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.
The deteriorating security situation in Afghanistan has been accompanied by rising ethnic tensions, warlord rivalries, as you just heard, corruption, and a government in the capital city that many say is barely functional. To walk us through what the U.S. faces, Andrew Wilder is Vice President of Asia Programs at the United States Institute of Peace. And Ahmed Rashid is a longtime journalist and the author of several books about Afghanistan and Central Asia. Gentlemen, we welcome you both to the program. Ahmed Rashid, I'm going to start with you. You wrote earlier this summer about the crisis that the U.S. faces in Afghanistan. You talked about the strengthening Taliban, the dangerous role of Iran and Russia, the political crisis in Kabul. How bad is the situation there?
Well, I think, you know, there are multiple crises. Much of the talk in the U.S. has been about troop levels and how many troops President Trump should send. But there are equally other major problems. There's a political crisis right now. The president, Ashraf Ghani, has lost a lot of legitimacy. There's enormous opposition against him from the parliament, from politicians and warlords. And I don't mean the Taliban. There's a huge economic crisis. And there's no guarantee that the Trump administration is going to come up with all the money that is going to be needed. And then there's this regional interference by now 3 neighboring countries are deeply involved in giving some kind of support to the Taliban: Pakistan, Iran, and Russia. And at the moment, it doesn't seem that the U.S. has a team either in the National Security Council or in the State Department which could deal with such a multitude list of problems.
Andrew Wilder, what would you add to that? And do you talk to this administration? Are they aware of what they're dealing with here?
I think they are, and it's very daunting, the challenges in Afghanistan. And I think the thing is, there is no quick fix. People are looking for a silver bullet, and for many years in many administrations, we've been looking for quick fix solutions. And so I think there is an opportunity to rethink our strategy, and I'll be listening very closely to President Trump tonight to see, what it's going to be. But in the segment you just showed, yes, there's very rightly skepticism. Say we decide on an additional 4,000 troops. What impact is that going to have when we had 100,000 troops before, and 4,000 more troops would bring us to around 12,500, 13,000? That's not going to defeat the insurgency. But I think, as Ahmed rightly pointed out, we've always focused on troop numbers and the military strategy and have not put nearly enough emphasis on what is the political strategy in Afghanistan. So I actually do hope we hear that there'll be more troops sent and we'll have a modest increase on the military side, but primarily to support a political strategy which should be focusing on what Ahmed said, getting the Afghan government to step up to the plate more, to tackle corruption and things that are undermining its legitimacy, which is fueling the insurgency. But also the regional strategy, getting Pakistan to do more, but also trying to focus on what is possible to get a politically negotiated end to the conflict with the Taliban.
Ahmed Rashid, what would the strategy be on the part of the United States that would address the regional threats, Iran, Russia, Pakistan, that would address this political crisis inside the capital with the current leadership?
I think what has been so sad is that for the last year or two, the U.S. has not had a regional strategy. It has not really been able to put together an alliance of countries around Afghanistan which would talk peace and persuade countries who are interfering to pull out of there, and the Taliban to get to the peace table. What you need is a major diplomatic push. Now, given everything else that's happening in the world, the Middle East, North Korea and others, I fear that President Trump is not going to put together a really high-powered team which is going to effectively deal with some of these neighboring countries and bring them together in some kind of alliance. And of course there are problems. I mean, the US has very shaky relations with Iran, but Iran is a major player. The US has very good relations with Pakistan, but it has also become a major player in backing the Taliban. So this needs a great deal of diplomatic effort, which at the moment is just not there.
Andrew Wilder, is it your sense, again, from talking to people in the administration, that they are prepared to come up with some semblance of a strategy that you and Ahmed are describing?
I think so. I mean, certainly, I think that we thought we were close to having a strategy in April and then in July, and I think one of the things that delayed it was a sense, in particular from the State Department, that we didn't have an adequate regional strategy. And I think Ahmed's right, is the absence of that has fueled destabilizing hedging behavior. People don't know what the U.S. policy is going to be, so Iran has helped step into that void a bit more. Russians have stepped into that void, in addition to what Pakistan's been doing.
But as you said yourself, Ahmed Rashid, a moment ago, the U.S. right now has strained relations with Iran, strained relations with Russia. So how does one see working around that to make a difference?
Well, I think there have been some very good proposals by American scholars that really would get the Americans to look at Afghanistan separately, perhaps involve other players, neutral players like the United Nations, and support a perhaps not an American-led, but a somebody else-led alliance of countries, which would include all the neighbors of Afghanistan and interested parties like Russia, Saudi Arabia and others, and get them to sit around a table and work something out. The problem is that certainly it's risky, and it would be extremely difficult to do, simply because the US doesn't have good relations with so many countries. But it's the only thing that's going to work. And if the US can't do it, get somebody else to do it.
Andrew Wilder, we heard Ahmed Rashid say a moment ago that part of this should be looking at a way to bring this to an end. But is that even realistic at this stage?
I think it's difficult, but I think it's realistic, and I think that's what our objective should be. And I would actually point out, one area where I think the Taliban, Afghanistan's neighbors, and the U.S. agree is, or President Trump agrees, we don't want our troops there forever. So that seems to be something we should negotiate on. It was interesting, when I used to travel to Afghanistan last year, the year before, the big concern of Afghanistan's neighbors was that we were leaving precipitously. It was going to collapse, which would be very bad for the neighborhood. Now I think the concern might be that, they also don't want us there forever. And so my argument for, I think, the opportunity for the Trump administration is to make the case that, no, we also want to leave, but we don't want to leave precipitously and have it collapse. We want to leave responsibly, and we can agree on that with Afghanistan's neighbors and eventually with the Taliban as well.
To both of you, very quickly at the end, Ahmed Rashid, what would you like to hear President Trump say tonight?
I would like to hear him give a very nuanced speech in which he does not just talk about the military deployment, but also talk about these other issues, strengthening the Afghan government, getting them to do more reforms, dealing with corruption, helping the economic crisis in Afghanistan, all these refugees who are fleeing the country, getting them to stay put by having a sounder economic policy and raising money from other places, and most importantly, taking steps to get the Taliban to the table to talk peace.
Andrew Wilder, just quickly to you. What do you want to hear?
Well, I would like him to renew our commitment that we want a partnership with Afghanistan. We don't want to abandon Afghanistan, because I think that would have a very stabilizing impact if Afghans knew we're not about to jump ship and abandon them. I think we'll have positive political, economic, and security benefits in the region. But also, I think President Trump needs to explain to the American people why we're in Afghanistan, why it's important not to leave precipitously and let it collapse, because I have no doubt in my mind it would then become, once again, a safe haven for transnational terrorist groups that would threaten the U.S.
If the U.S. did pull out.
Exactly, yeah.
Andrew Wilder, Ahmed Rashid. Gentlemen, thank you both.
Thank you.